Thank you everyone for being here. I understand. Happy May, happy Mental Health Awareness Month. I understand that we all are very, very busy and have very important jobs. So if you have to pop off at any point, don't worry. You are registered, so you will be emailed a recording of this as well. So if you have any colleagues that couldn't make today or anything like that, you will be sent a recording after the fact. So my name is Mary Ellen Dance. I am the Director of Corporate Training at ENI, which is an Employee Assistance Program. And in honor of May 1st, and May being Mental Health Awareness Month, I wanted to be able to provide a mental health awareness training. So what I'm going to go through today is just some broad overview mental health awareness information that will hopefully be helpful both at work, at home, in life, anywhere. Obviously, I'm coming from an employee assistance program, so I am going to be focused a little bit on the workplace, but all of the information should be helpful in all different settings. I will provide my contact information at the end of this if you have any other questions. Again, none of today is meant to be advice. None of today is meant to tell you what to do. It is for the purposes, it is for the purposes of being a broad overview, information sharing, and celebrating mental health awareness, and that we have so many amazing people here who want to help destigmatize mental health and learn more. So, without further ado, let's get into it. Today, we are going to just do a broad overview of what mental health really is, understanding the prevalence of mental health. Unfortunately, we probably already know, but I will go over some of the prevalence. And we're going to focus on three main areas of mental health today. We're going to focus on stress, anxiety, and depression. So we will focus on those three areas today. Again, I will leave my contact information at the end if you have other questions. We are going to talk about creating a supportive workplace, building resiliency and coping skills, promoting work-life balance, all of those things mental health and work related. And then lastly, we will address the stigma of mental health and how we can be a part of the solution. So when talking about understanding mental health encompasses emotional, psychological, and social well-being. Mental health encompasses so many things. And it gets very confusing because often when people talk about mental health, they may be using different definitions. So somebody may be referring to just general mental health. Somebody may be referring to a specific mental health disorder. So it's really important to recognize that this term mental health encompasses emotional, psychological, and social well-being. All of our mental health influences how we think, how we act, how we feel every single day. So for example, someone who has really great coping skills, someone who has really positive mental health, they can effectively cope with adversity and challenges, maintain, low levels of stress, make good decisions. I think we all aim to have optimal mental health. It doesn't always happen, but I think we all aim for that, just like we all aim for optimal physical health. Just like physical health, mental health is kind of on a continuum, right? Ranging from flourishing and happy and, able to handle adversity and able to adapt and great coping skills, to the other end of the spectrum where someone may be experiencing mental health challenges, maybe a diagnosable mental health issue, or other types of disorders that impairs their daily functioning, impairs their quality of life. It's really important to think about this spectrum because we all probably land somewhere in the middle. So for the purposes of today, I am going to be talking about mental health as a whole. When I talk about anxiety and depression, I will mention anxiety-related disorders and depressive-related disorders, but I am talking about kind of that middle area too, because whether we have an anxiety-related disorder or a depressive-related disorder, We most often can relate to having experienced feelings of anxiety or feelings of depression or phases of depression in our lives, or maybe we know someone who's experienced depression. So, again, for the purposes of today, I'm going to use these broad terms, not necessarily meaning a disorder, but on this spectrum of mental health. It's also important to recognize that there are so many factors that contribute to mental health. A lot of mental health disorders do have genetic components. There is our environment, our life experiences, if we have experienced trauma. There are lifestyle factors. Diet, exercise, are we sleeping? There are circumstantial factors. Maybe we just got laid off, maybe we just got divorced. Those circumstantial life factors affects our mental health. So it is really important to recognize that mental health, whether it's positive or negative, is coming from all different areas and all different places in our life, in our lives, impact our mental health. So again, we all know that mental health is rampant, but according to the World Health Organization, approximately 1 in 4 people worldwide will experience a mental health disorder at some point in their lives. So that's 1 in 4 people experiencing a diagnosable mental health disorder, which is an astronomically high number. But those other 3 people out of the 1 in 4 can experience adverse mental health symptoms even if they don't experience a diagnosable mental health disorder. So adverse mental health symptoms can be impacting people even if they aren't the 1 in 4 who experience a diagnosable mental health disorder. One thing that I do want to point out, and if you don't listen to anything else I say today, please listen to this, is that the wording of will experience a mental health disorder at some point in their lives. That means there are other points in their lives where they do not experience the mental health disorder. In order to be diagnosed with a mental health disorder, there's a certain criteria that someone needs to meet. We can't just say, oh, you seem depressed, you have depression, right? There's criteria that needs to be met. And so the really, really awesome thing about mental health disorders that we don't talk about enough is that a lot of them are incredibly treatable. So today we're going to be focusing on stress, anxiety, and depression. And anxiety related disorders, depressive related disorders are very treatable. So someone can have an anxiety related disorder and meet the criteria for that disorder at one point in their life, and then it can be treated, and then they cannot meet criteria for that disorder. So again, that's something that we need to bring into the conversation way more often, that help exists, that these are treatable. They absolutely are treatable. Now, again, I'm speaking in general terms. Unfortunately, there are some chronic, just like with physical health conditions, there are some chronic physical and chronic mental health disorders. But just for the purposes of, we're trying to destigmatize things, and part of destigmatizing things is recognizing that treatment support can help. It can help. In terms of the workplace, a survey conducted by the American Psychological Association, found that work-related stress is a major issue. 64% of adults report that work is a significant source of stress. I'm sure we can all relate to that. Untreated mental health issues have profound consequences for individuals and organizations. So obviously anything that's untreated is going to get worse. It's not going to get better. So it's going to get worse in our personal lives, but in talking about the workplace, that's going to lead to decreased productivity, increased absenteeism, decreased presenteeism. We will talk towards the end about some of the specific work-related impact of mental health disorders. So with that statistic about stress, let's chat about stress for a minute, something we all feel probably more often than not. According to the American Institute of Stress, 77% of people regularly experience physical symptoms caused by stress, and 73% of people experience psychological symptoms caused by stress. Everyone experiences stress. Stress is a part of life. It is a part of life. The secret to stress is not experiencing it, because it's unfortunately a part of life, but is in how we cope with it, is in how we cope with it. So often I hear people say things like, I don't want to be stressed. Yeah, me neither. I don't think anyone wants to be stressed, but we can't totally get rid of it. However, we can cope a little bit better with it. So let's talk about some common things that cause stress. So there are big stressors: chronic illnesses, loss of loved ones, poverty, racism, domestic violence, all of these huge stressors. And a lot of us who we work with, whether we know it or not, are experiencing some of these huge stressors. There's also other types of stress that impact us just as much: relationships, job insecurities, feeling like we don't have control over things at work. This is just a short list of common examples of things that are causing us stress these days. I could have made a list that went on and on for pages and pages and pages, but for the purposes of this, I just wanted to make a little bit of a short list to give us an idea. Oftentimes, we are experiencing stress from all angles. We're getting stress from the workplace, from our kids, from home, from friends, from our relationship, financial stress. Oh, I can't even believe I didn't write financial stress on there. That's huge. So there's all these causes of stress, and it's coming from every angle. As we can see from these statistics, we are all experiencing stress. The problem is, prolonged stress exposure leaves stress hormones switched on for a long time. And when stress hormones are switched on for a long time, that impacts areas of the brain responsible for emotions, emotion regulation, memory. Having these stress hormones switched on for so long can make it difficult to concentrate, to make decisions, to effectively solve problems. It's making our brains not work as well. Prolonged stress can also lead to significant health problems, weaken the immune system, increase inflammation, elevate blood pressure. There is a direct link between prolonged stress and cardiovascular disease. And I believe that cardiovascular disease is still the #1 cause of death in America. And so it's so fascinating to me that the #1 cause of death in America, cardiovascular disease, is directly linked to stress, which is something that we can manage. It's hard and it takes work to manage, and we have to figure out how to manage it, but it's something that we can manage and that we can control. Stress is literally killing us, and we are living in an environment, we are living in a world that is almost glorifying stress. So I don't know about any of you, but I find myself in conversations all the time where it almost feels like people are one-upping each other and like having a contest of who's more stressed. And it makes me so sad, because being stressed is not a badge of honor. Being stressed is not something we should be bragging about. Being stressed is something that we should all be working to cope with in a more healthy way. Prolonged stress can also lead to symptoms of anxiety, depression. It can lead to potentially a mental health disorder, an anxiety-related disorder, or a depressive-related disorder, if it's unaddressed. So I am not saying, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that stress causes mental illness. There are many different causes and reasons for mental illness. However, prolonged stress is a huge factor in a lot of cases in terms of developing mental illness, developing symptoms of anxiety, depression, irritability, mood swings, things like that. Stress is a huge issue. It's also important to note that there is a mental health disorder called post-traumatic stress disorder, and post-traumatic stress disorder often develops after one specific stressful or traumatic event. However, prolonged stress it's not necessarily one stressful event that can lead to a mental health crisis, right? So if I am stressed from work and I am dissolving a relationship and my child is sick and we don't know what's wrong with them, right? All these different stressful events, and that's causing a lot of prolonged stress. My coping skills, my interpretation of the events, my lack of support, all of those things can then lead to some of these mental health symptoms or mental health disorders. So it's really, really important to be aware of that and to look at that. So again, stress, something that we all experience. Maybe we're experiencing stress in this very moment, just hearing about stress. Let's look at some of the negative ways that we cope with stress. Some of the ways that we cope with stress that are not helping. Rage or aggression. We've all done it. We've all, had a bad day at work and come home and picked a fight with our spouse. We have done that. It's not helpful though. Substance abuse. I hear people say things all the time of, oh, I'm stressed, I just need a glass of wine. If you are of age and can drink responsibly, that is wonderful, but drinking responsibly is also includes drinking for the right reasons. And drinking because we are stressed is not helpful. Obviously, right now I'm talking about alcohol, but other substance abuse too, marijuana, other illegal substances is a huge way that people try to cope with stress. And the thing with substance use and coping with stress is that it kind of works, right? So if you have a really, really stressful day and then you go home and have a glass of wine, it helps you forget about your stressful day for a minute, but it works for like a minute and then it makes things worse and worse and worse. Eating too much or too little, we see this all the time, unhealthy eating habits. People often will binge eat because they're stressed or skip meals because they're stressed, whatever it may be. Eating at the end of the day is meant to fuel our bodies, and eating also, food makes our brains work. And so we need to make sure we're eating appropriately and fueling our bodies, because if our brains are already not working as well because of our stress hormones, we definitely need to feed them food to make our brains work well. Isolation is another big one. Often when we are stressed, we just don't want to be around people. We want to kind of hole up. Once in a while, that's okay. But if we're doing that a lot, that is not helping stress. One of the biggest things we need as human beings, all human beings need social supports. And so isolating is not a great stress reliever. Avoidance, kind of all of these relate to avoidance. Oh, I'm going to have a glass of wine to avoid thinking about it. I'm going to isolate so I don't have to talk about it, that kind of thing. Avoiding stress is not helping. So we as human beings, we love to ignore stress. We love to say things like, I don't have time to be stressed. I hope some of you are laughing at that because I'm sure some of you can relate to that. Maybe you've said that even recently. We love to say that. Avoiding stress does not make it go away. It makes it worse. It makes it come out in different ways. Oh, I'm going to avoid that I'm stressed. Has anyone ever experienced, oh, I'm going to avoid and ignore that I'm stressed and hope it goes away. And then, I don't know, a week later you get sick and then you can't ignore it, right? Stress does not go away from ignoring it. And avoiding it is where a lot of us really, really like to live. And that is not making it any better. Another negative stress reliever that I want to mention is rumination. So when I say the word rumination, I mean dwelling on negative thoughts, dwelling on worries, dwelling on past events. Rumination can really, really fuel feelings of anxiety and depression. So let me give you a work example. Let's say one of you works with someone who's kind of toxic in the workplace. Unfortunately, we have all dealt with some toxic people in workplaces, hopefully not where we work currently. But let's say we're dealing with that and all we do is talk about it. We talk about it with our colleagues at work. We talk about it with our friends. Our friends know all about this person because we talk about it. We talk about it with our spouses. We're just focusing on it and focusing on it and focusing on it and focusing on it. That's not helpful. That's not helpful. I hear a lot of people say things like, well, it's not good to not talk about my feelings, which is true. It is important to be able to talk about our feelings. Holding feelings inside is not healthy. However, there is a difference between being able to talk about our feelings and ruminating, dwelling, going around on the negative cycle. So that's a really, really important thing to be aware of, that distinction. Self-harm. So unfortunately, self-harm can look different for different people. Unfortunately, we're seeing self-harm in teenagers a lot these days. Well, all days, but even more so. Forms of self-harm like cutting and burning. But we also see self-harm in other ways, like making really rash decisions or irrational choices, or, for example, drinking and driving. That's a form of self-harm, things like that. So when I say self-harm, yes, I do mean the traditional, what we think of self-harm. But I also mean other things that we're just making decisions that are harming ourselves as well. Excessive screen time, zoning out, scrolling through TikTok or Instagram or wherever we're scrolling is not a form of relaxation. That is not a coping skill. So I do want to talk for a minute about the difference between dissociating, and when I say dissociating, I mean zoning out, scrolling, and relaxing. Now, once in a while, we are human beings and our emotions are just a little too much for us, and we kind of need to dissociate, right? We kind of need to say, I need to turn off my brain because this is too much for me to handle right now. So I'm going to binge watch this TV show. I'm going to scroll through these TikTok videos, whatever. Once in a while, we need to do that, and that's okay. But that's not the same as relaxation. That's not the same as recharging, coping, quieting our minds. It's not the same as that. And so one really big thing that we're seeing is people are using this excessive screen time thinking, oh, I'm relaxing. And it's like, again, I'm not saying that we don't need to dissociate sometimes. I'm not saying that we don't need that once in a while, but we need both, and we need the relaxing, recharging. Again, we're going to talk about healthy coping skills today. So we will see the difference between that, but that's a really, really important thing that I want us all to be aware of. So, as I mentioned, prolonged stress can lead to anxiety, can lead to depression. And again, we want to make sure that we are coping with stress. We've talked about negative stress relievers. We will talk about positive stress relievers at the end, positive coping skills. But I first want to talk about some symptoms of anxiety. Again, right now, when I'm saying the word anxiety, I'm saying that as a broad term, not as a diagnosable disorder, just as a feeling, as a symptom. That's how I'm referring to it currently. So some symptoms of anxiety that we may experience is uncontrollable worry. And we all know what worry is like, but that uncontrollable, I can't stop thinking about it. I've tried to stop thinking about it and I can't stop thinking about it. I'm in a spiral of what if and what if and what if and what if. Feeling powerless. Again, if I can't control my thoughts, then I'm going to feel pretty powerless. Having a sense of impending danger or doom, even if there's nothing, even if there's no evidence or no reason why we should feel a sense of impending danger and doom, still having a sense of impending danger or doom. Difficulty concentrating. Again, if my brain is going a mile a minute and I am also trying to do work, I'm not going to really be able to concentrate that well on that work. Irritability. Anxiety often causes a lot of exhaustion. And so because our brains are running at the speed of light. And so when we are exhausted, that also makes us very irritable. Oftentimes people may experience heightened anxiety, whether it be a panic attack or just moments of heightened anxiety. And in those moments of heightened anxiety, they may experience rapid breathing, shortness of breath, irregular sleep patterns, either sleeping too much or not sleeping enough, increased heart rate, lots of other physical symptoms as well. So some anxiety related disorders that maybe we've heard of, generalized anxiety disorder. Typically, if people say, "Oh, I'm diagnosed with anxiety," they typically mean generalized anxiety disorder. There's different specific phobias. If someone has a phobia of snakes or flying or heights or whatever it may be. Panic disorders. Panic disorders mean when someone has recurrent panic attacks. Agoraphobia, we've probably heard of this. People like to write like mystery novels where there's a character with agoraphobia. I feel like I see this a lot in like books or movies. Agoraphobia is people often think that agoraphobia is a fear of public places. It's not. Agoraphobia is a fear of being in a place where there might not be an escape. So oftentimes agoraphobia develops with panic disorders. Hypothetically, maybe someone has a panic attack in a grocery store, and then, people gather around them and it's embarrassing and it's uncomfortable. And then they develop agoraphobia and don't want to go to grocery stores for fear that that will happen again and that they won't be able to escape. There's social anxiety disorders. This is pretty self-explanatory, but that's another kind of subset of anxiety related disorders. And obsessive compulsive disorders aren't technically in the anxiety related disorder umbrella. However, I like to put them on here because oftentimes obsessive compulsive disorders come with a lot of symptoms of anxiety and can look kind of the same. So again, the purposes of today, we're talking about anxiety in broad terms, but it's Mental Health Awareness Month. So I want us to all be aware of some anxiety related disorders that we might be experiencing, or we may meet people with some of these disorders. So another common one that is affecting the workplace, is affecting all of us, is depression. And so some symptoms of depression that I want to go over. Sadness is a big symptom. However, depression is a lot more than just sadness. Depression is a lot of hopelessness, feeling empty. Often people who are experiencing a depressive related symptoms may say that they're not necessarily sad, they just feel nothing. Difficulty concentrating is a huge symptom. People with depression can have suicidal ideation, but they don't necessarily have suicidal ideation. Again, they can go hand in hand, but they don't always go hand in hand. Isolation, not wanting to be around people, not enjoying things that they used to enjoy. Low self-esteem is a really, really big one. Anger, irritability, and decreased motivation. So people who are experiencing depression often might not want to go to work. They don't have motivation to go to work. They don't have motivation to get up and clean their house. Heck, maybe they don't even have motivation to get up and shower. So motivation is a huge, huge symptom of depression as well that we might be seeing. So, knowing some of these symptoms of stress, prolonged stress, knowing some things about anxiety, knowing some things about depression, let's talk about mental health in the workplace. People experiencing prolonged stress, anxiety, depression in the workplace, that often leads to the person not liking their job. Decreased morale. If a lot of people are experiencing untreated mental health conditions, if a lot of people are experiencing prolonged stress without having appropriate coping skills, that's going to decrease the morale and engagement at work. Employees struggling with mental health may not be able to concentrate, make good decisions, effectively perform work duties. Think of it, a lot of us in our jobs need to make decisions often. And so if we are not able to make those good decisions, that's going to be a problem. Increased absenteeism, whether the person is experiencing physical symptoms related to their mental health disorder, whether the person is struggling with motivation, so they don't want to come to work. Um, Increased absenteeism is actually a huge, huge problem in the workforce today. Even when we're at work, being less productive. Decreased presenteeism. So what that means is kind of just showing up and going through the motions, not really being mentally present. Obviously, that's going to lead to some decreased productivity as well. And increased healthcare costs for employers. So people are going on disability more than they ever have for mental health related issues. Um, People are needing more support, are getting more support, which is great if they're getting more support, but it's all being related to increased healthcare costs for employers. So now that I've officially kind of brought us down, thinking about what all these symptoms are like, how it's affecting us, how it's affecting the workplace, how it's not great. Let's talk about the other side of things and what we do about all of this. So the first and most important thing that we need to do is we need to focus on resiliency. Resiliency in its definition is the ability to bounce back from adversity, to adapt to challenges, and thrive despite setbacks. Resilient individuals demonstrate psychological flexibility, optimism. They demonstrate a sense of purpose. And guess what? We are all resilient. Whether we feel it or not, we are resilient. If you think about your life and all of the things you've been through in your life and all of the times that you thought, oh, I don't know how I'm going to get through this, and then you did get through it, we are resilient. We just forget that we are. So some components of really resilient individuals, some components of those individuals who really lean into their resiliency, they're self-aware. They're aware of their own actions. They're aware of their own coping skills. They're aware of their own strengths and areas of improvement. Resilient individuals also have problem-solving skills. They also have social supports. We need social supports to thrive. We just do. And the ability to adapt. So resiliency, again, in its definition, is really just being able to adapt to things. And so if we can lean into our ability to adapt, we're going to be healthier and happier. And again, we all have this ability. We just forget it. We often switch our focus to all of the things we can't do versus all of the things we have done and can do. Components of resilient individuals also have a positive mindset. So that does not mean that someone who is very resilient gets bad news and thinks, oh, great, I got bad news, right? We're humans. That doesn't mean that. But it means that their mindset thinks, okay, well, I'm going to get through this. I'm going to utilize my social supports. I'm going to try to problem solve. I'm going to try to focus. I'm going to be thankful for what I do have. That's what that positive mindset means. It doesn't mean head in the clouds, we're ignoring our problems. It just means we're not stuck in the negative with our problems. So we talked about some unhealthy coping skills. Let's talk about some healthy coping skills. So there's kind of three different categories of coping that I want to go over. So the first category is emotional coping. So let's manage our emotions. That can be relaxation techniques. It can be mindfulness. It can be journaling. It can be going to therapy, reading self-help books, anything like that. There's also problem-focused coping. So I am struggling, hypothetically, I am struggling with my job. Okay, what can I control? What can I do about that? Do I need to change something? Can I do something different with my time management? Do I need to ask for help, right? Problem focused coping. And then social coping, asking for help, spending time with loved ones, support groups, anything like that. And so ideally, all of us in the world should have coping skills under each bucket: emotional coping, problem-focused coping, and social coping. We want to have different coping skills in all of those buckets, and we want to be utilizing all of those buckets. So cognitive behavioral therapy is the most evidence-based therapy out there, I believe. Don't quote me on that, but there's a lot of evidence that cognitive behavioral therapy works. And the idea behind cognitive behavioral therapy is that our thoughts, which we can control, drive how we feel and how we behave. So this is what cognitive therapy looks at. It looks at our thoughts. What's my internal dialogue? What am I thinking? And how those thoughts lead to emotions. How am I feeling? And then how those emotions lead to behaviors. So the example here on this screen is if the thought is, I'm never going to be good enough, my emotions aren't going to be great. I'm going to feel frustrated, hopeless, sad, low self-esteem. And when I'm feeling all of those feelings, what am I going to do? I'm probably not going to be that motivated. I'm going to procrastinate. I'm going to compare myself to others. Maybe I'm going to avoid. Maybe I'm going to lean into some of those unhealthy coping skills that we talked about earlier. So the whole crux of cognitive behavioral therapy is looking at that thought. And instead of just having that thought of, I'm never going to be good enough, changing that thought to, okay, I got passed up for this promotion and that really, really stinks. But that doesn't mean I'm not good enough. That just means that this wasn't the right promotion for me. And I'm going to keep working hard and maybe I'll get a different, even better promotion. How am I going to feel then? Probably still a little bummed that I was passed up for the promotion, but maybe I'll feel a little bit more hopeful, a little bit more motivated, a little bit more confident. And then how am I going to behave when I'm feeling that way? I'm going to do better work. I'm going to lean on my social supports. I'm going to be happier to be around. I'm going to make better decisions. And then making better decisions obviously is going to lead to better thoughts, and we can see how it goes in a spiral. So again, this is a very, very broad overview of cognitive behavioral therapy. But in talking about coping skills and this emotional coping, problem-focused coping, and social coping, I also want us to think about this thought coping and how we can work to change our thoughts and to challenge our thoughts, because that is going to help change everything. It's going to help change everything. So again, I am here from an employee assistance program. So one thing that goes along very, very commonly with mental health awareness, especially mental health awareness at work, is work-life balance. Work-life balance, because I think we all could have better work-life balance. So let's talk about what that looks like. So some things that workplaces can do: flexible work arrangements when possible, boundaries with work. If we are not on call, then let's limit after hours phone calls, things like that. It's amazing the amount of people I ask people all the time if they answer emails in bed, and it's always at least 90% of people say they do. And then they say, well, I don't feel good. And it's like, yeah, I wouldn't feel good if I was answering work emails in bed either. So setting boundaries for ourselves is huge when it comes to work-life balance. Promoting and encouraging self-care, whether that's the workplace promoting and encouraging self-care, or whether it's, colleague to colleague, hey, I'm going to take a walk on my lunch break. Do you want to come with me? That kind of thing. Little things like that can make a huge difference. Promoting and encouraging time off. We have time off, so let's use it. So a big thing that I see in workplaces is I see leaders who say all these wonderful, wonderful things about promoting work-life balance, but then they don't walk the walk. They'll say, yeah, set boundaries, take your time off, and then they'll be emailing their staff at 9 o'clock at night. We have to not just talk the talk, but we have to walk the walk. We have to walk the walk. If we are trying to set boundaries at work and not trying to do after hours work, if we're not on call and don't have to, then don't do after hours work. Because if you keep doing that, then people will keep expecting you to do that. So it's a huge, huge problem with work-life balance because we all know these things, right? We all know the self-care and the time off and the boundaries. We all know that. But in order to actually get that, we have to walk the walk. So in talking about mental health in general, the purposes of today is I wanted to give an overview of mental health awareness because it is Mental Health Awareness Month. We will be doing a lot of things this month about mental health awareness and supporting mental health awareness, but I cannot talk about mental health awareness without talking about addressing the stigma. So, in addressing the stigma, I want to give us a few do's and don'ts that might just help us moving forward. If we are interacting with people who are struggling with mental health disorders or other mental health struggles, some of these do's and don'ts might help us. So, in addressing the stigma, it's vital that we educate ourselves. Vital. So coming to things like this is really great. Asking questions, understanding things is huge. It's important to recognize that language matters. When we talk about the do's and don'ts, we will talk about some of that language. It's important to normalize conversations. Thankfully, we're getting a lot better with this, but we still have a long way to go. So normalizing talking about mental health, normalizing going to therapy, normalizing I'm feeling not great, so I'm going to ask my doctor what's going on. That's huge. Again, as I was talking about, not just talking the talk, but walking to the walk, we need to lead by example. We need to lead by example. If we are saying take care of your mental health and then we're not taking care of our mental health, that's not going to have a great effect. Always providing resources and support. Some of this has to do with education and awareness. Educate yourself. There are so many resources that I am sure you know like 2% of them, right? Because there are so many out there. And so educating yourself on what are some resources in the community. Are there resources at my work that I don't even know about? Maybe there's resources at my kid's school that I don't even know about. Educating yourself on what's available. Workplaces, always I want to encourage workplaces to promote inclusive policies. That is very, very important. And then some of the do's and don'ts with destigmatizing mental health. So we do want to learn symptoms. We want to learn what this means. We want to understand it. When someone says I'm experiencing anxiety, we want to learn, okay, what exactly does that mean? Do try to understand. It's okay if we don't completely understand what someone else is going through, but we can ask questions. We can ask questions. We can learn. We can try to put ourselves in their shoes. We also want to let other people know that we care. And this may be uncomfortable to say, but it is life changing often for people to hear. I care about your mental health and I want you to feel better. Maybe we've never said something like that before, even though we've thought it, even though we believe that, maybe saying it and sharing that with loved ones can make all the difference in the world. We do want to take people seriously. If someone is saying that they're feeling depressed, we don't want to say, yeah, okay, whatever. We want to take it seriously. We do want to listen without judgment. This is a hard one because most of us, we don't mean to be judgmental, but we're humans, right? It's human nature to be a little bit judgmental. But if we can be aware of that, and if we can even say, "Hey, I'm trying to not be judgmental. I just want to learn. I want to understand. Like I want to help." That's huge. We do want to use person first language. And so, what I mean by that is we don't want to say, oh, that anxious person. We want to say that person who has anxiety or who is experiencing anxiety. They are not an anxious person, they're a person. They're a person who's experiencing anxiety. So, we do want to use person first language. We also want to be very, very aware of the language we are using. So, unfortunately, mental health terminology has become a big part of our daily vernacular. So for example, people will, clean up their desk and say, oh, sorry, I'm so OCD. Or people will, be sad about something and say, oh, I'm just so depressed, right? We want to be really, really careful of that. Wanting a clean desk is not OCD. And so we want to be careful of our vernacular and that we are not using mental health language as slang terms. Again, I am sure we have done it accidentally, and that's okay. But that's something that we really, really want to be aware of that can really, really help with destigmatizing mental health. So a few don'ts. We don't want to keep any type of suicidal or harmful threat a secret. So if a colleague, if a friend, if a child, if a child's friend, whoever says any type of suicidal threat, we do not want to keep it a secret. We do want to ask for help. We do want to talk about that. We also don't want to make assumptions. We don't want to make an assumption that if somebody comes to you and says, oh, I'm experiencing, a depressive episode, we don't want to assume, oh, that means they're suicidal. We can ask questions. We can always ask questions, but we don't want to make assumptions. We also don't want to minimize. We don't want to minimize. We want to encourage resiliency. Like with our kids, we want to encourage, we can get through this, we can go through this, but your feelings are also very, very real and very, very valid. We don't want to force disclosure. So I've been saying a lot today that it's okay to ask questions, and it is okay to ask questions, but it is also okay if that person doesn't want to answer those questions. It's also okay. If someone chooses to come to us and disclose something with us, that is an honor. It's humbling that, someone else feels that they can trust us with whatever they are disclosing to us in those moment and in that moment, and we do want to thank them for that and appreciate that, but we also don't want to force them to self-disclose. With not forcing self-disclosure, I really, really, really want to highlight traumatic and stressful events. So if someone comes to you and discloses maybe there is a physical altercation in their home, and they disclose that, we want to make sure we don't ask too specific questions because there is a fear of being re-traumatized. If someone experiences trauma and then talks about it over and over, there is a fear of re-traumatizing that person. So we can ask questions about how they're feeling and what they need and how you can best support, but we don't want to force people to share more details about like a stressful or traumatic event than they don't want to. We also don't want to blame or shame. We don't want to blame or shame. We all do things that we're not proud of. We all have some unhealthy coping skills. So if someone says, discloses to you that they're experiencing anxiety and you say, well, yeah, if you just like had a better diet, maybe you wouldn't. That's blaming and shaming. We want to be careful that we're not doing that. We also don't want to ignore. We don't want to ignore it. Oftentimes we ignore people disclosing mental health related struggles or things because it's uncomfortable. It's a little uncomfortable and it's a little scary, and maybe we don't know exactly what to say, but ignoring it is the worst thing we can do. It's okay that you don't know what to say. It's okay. Oftentimes people just need someone to be there for them and to listen to them and to support them. So I want to thank you all for being here. I want to thank you for taking the time. I hope that not just this month, but every month, you all can receive, mental health education, awareness. I love, love, love that May is Mental Health Awareness Month, so we can just be aware of some of these things. My goal is to give people some language to use, give people some things to think about, maybe give some clarification to some commonly used words that we might not know what they mean. That's my goal. I just realized that I put our website on here, but I did not put my contact information. So I just put in the chat my email address. Please, please, please feel free to email me with any questions, any thoughts, anything. Again, I just have to say today was meant to be a broad overview. It was not meant to be advice or specific. It was just meant to be a broad overview to help encourage some of that awareness, education, destigmatization, so we can all be better there for each other and all help be a part of the solution. I'll help be a part of the solution. So thank you so much for coming here. I really, really appreciate you taking the time, and I appreciate all the work that you do. And I hope that you can all go into this month being, mental health awareness ambassadors.